Alrighty, by my clock, I have 6:05. I want to honor everyone's time. I expect there are some meals happening, some last evening activities going on, and so we are going to go ahead and begin. Um, as some of you all have already, you'll be able to add comments as we go along, to add questions. And thanks so much in advance to our assistant principals, Melissa Oliver and Ruth Ann Freeman, who are going to help bring some of those questions to my attention as I look to continue talking through our agenda with you all. And I'll also refer back to the questions at the end that we've received from parents ahead of time to try to make sure that we can address many of those. And those questions that we can't address tonight, we're going to hold on to so that in future principal messages and other information, we will be certain to be able to try and address those things. So with that, I do just want to say, even though I can't see you all, I am so excited to be with you all this evening. Today is supposed to be our first day of school. When we had a former life and a calendar that was set for us to begin our first day of school with students was to be here on July 8th. So it's fitting that I come to you today to talk about when we will be able to return to learning, a fact that I am really excited about and that I trust and hope that you all are as well. In our general agenda here, I want to mention to you how I'll go forward talking about this. The first of which is to give just a quick broad arc of the way that our schools will reopen underneath the guidance from North Carolina, and then ways that we are preparing for both blended learning, which will be a mix of in-person and online learning, and remote learning, online learning through our virtual academy. We'll then talk, as I mentioned, so that broad arc, then some health information that will include some information on transportation as well, and then some more detailed instructional information that we will try to hopefully use to answer many of the questions that we have received in advance, and then we'll go back to some of the specific details that were indicated in those questions ahead. So at the start, I do just want to say, hopefully you all have received some of the district messaging and information, including the return to school guide that they sent out a few days ago. If you are not, for any reason, receiving district information or our principal messages on a semi-regular basis, you can contact our data manager, Mrs. Joy Tang. Her contact information is on our school's website, and she can help you just to update your contact information with our school so that you're receiving that consistent communication via email, primarily from the district and from our school. In that communication, you would have seen that our district is moving forward to reopen and prepare for new learning and for students in two distinct ways. The first and primary of which is to return to school underneath the governor's Plan B moderate social distancing model that we believe will provide for the health and safety of our students, of our district's employees, and provide the valuable connection from in-person learning here at school. It will be a mix of in-person learning and online learning, and that may be the learning structure that your family chooses to re-enter the school building underneath. There is a separate but connected under our school structure for families who may have some significant health concerns that mean that they won't be able to rejoin our school community inside the building. And that is through the development of a new district virtual academy that is a parallel instructional opportunity that is housed for us here at Alston Ridge Elementary School and for each of our district schools within that umbrella of your local school. One of the most important considerations as we look at the blended learning model, this Plan B underneath Governor Roy Cooper's guidance and with the information from the Department of Health and Human Services here in North Carolina and the CDC, is safety of every student and all of our faculty. And so I want to talk first about the way that we are preparing to see to the health of each of your children. And I want to talk about that in the way in which each of us is going to play a role based on that guidance in ensuring health and safety as we return to school. So the first of which really is, what will the school do? That is an emphasis on that CDC and DHHS guidance, an emphasis on instructing students around the 4 W's to wash hands regularly, wear a mask, and wait 6 feet apart. But it is more significantly on the systems and structures that will help to ensure that students are coming to school healthy, that they're able to observe those public health protocols that are going to help keep them healthy, and that we are operating in a way that is responding to circumstances where anyone might be unwell. That comes from all the things that we'll see around our school. Markings throughout our hallways and in areas where students might congregate that will help provide guides and reminders to students for pacing. A huge part of it is the care and attention of our faculty, who's going to be working diligently to educate our students and provide those opportunities for those 3 W's. For us to be able to provide those health checks, at the beginning of each day, when students are coming off of the bus, coming from our cars, walking up to our building. And so I want to talk about that a little more specifically with those health checks, because those are a big part of the structures that we'll have in place. Prior to coming into our building at Alston Ridge, all of our families are going to be responsible for providing some affirmation of your student's health, and we'll do that simple receiving of that affidavit or that affirmation of students' health, and our faculty is going to be coordinating to be able to, through touchless thermometers, take students' temperature prior to entering the school building. That is going to be coming from our car line. We would expect to be taking temperatures at cars, where families are still going to be there in case there was any concern to ensure that folk are together. It is going to include for our students who are in our walk zone, walking up to school. It will also include students who are coming in off of our buses before entering the school building. For those families who do utilize school bus transportation, the district is encouraging an adult or a responsible child to be alongside those students at the bus stop to make sure that they're able to support responding to any health needs that do arise. And so right there from that moment, that parent, that mature sibling is going to be attesting to the bus driver that the child is healthy. If there isn't a completed health attestation that includes an acknowledgement that the temperature's been checked that morning and that it is not an elevated temperature, then the bus driver will have the ability to be able to check a temperature to make sure that student's well before accessing the bus. And then they're going to transfer onto the bus, come on board, and then students will have their temperatures checked before coming to the school building. This is a really important protocol because it's going to help to ensure that students are arriving to our school well, and that if any student is arriving and they aren't well, that we're able to have that student be separated from the rest of our students who are attending on that day, to ensure that we are able to be in touch with parents, help make sure that student is comfortable and safe until they can be picked up, and that the rest of the learning for the day can continue. Within the building, and we've had a couple questions there around social distancing, and I want to mention those guidelines around masks as well, which is going to be that all of our faculty members, and in fact, any adults who are coming to our school building, will be expected to wear masks unless there's a medical exception. That's a critical point in preserving the health of all of our students. Our students at the elementary level the majority of whom are at or under the age of 11, are recommended to wear masks throughout the school day, but it is not a requirement from the district, nor in the guidelines that we've received from the state. So firstly, those masks, we say all of our teachers will be smiling with their eyes, dancing to show their extra enthusiasm, where we might not be able to see the smile, but focused on that safety first. They will guide students for that social distancing, and that social distancing is, as I mentioned, going to be marked off in our hallways, in our classrooms. Our facilities departments have been very thoughtful, have looked at our schematics, have come on site to our buildings to make sure that they've identified a room capacity that we're going to observe to ensure that we can maintain those social distancing throughout that classroom and with the different changes and activities even in the rooms. Our furniture will provide some separation, and while we oftentimes on the carpet in times past are beckoning students to come up to listen closely to the story that we have to tell, we are going to be conscientious and have marked out to be able to maintain that social distancing throughout the course of that classroom time as well. We will see some reduction in those transitions throughout our school building, where we're looking to limit the degree to which our students in those classroom cohorts are interacting with students throughout the building, so that we really can be accountable, not just in the event that we do have confirmed positive cases within our student population, where we can do more effective contact tracing, but so that we can just have students, be exposed to fewer other folk. And when we know that the most critical relationships are those with their peers in class and with the adults who are there, we think that's one that's going to be successful. I'm going to mention just, and some of these are, well, I'm going to keep going here just for a moment on what our teachers will do, what our students will do, what our parents will do, just as reminders. Our teachers are going to be having our students take breaks for regular hand washing. As I mentioned, they are going to be thoughtful in the organization of the classroom and creating some of those spaces for separation. They're going to allow for students to be more safe in those rooms. And we are going to be, just providing that additional education on the care that we share by being thoughtful and being conscientious. I'm certain that many of you all have been impressed at some point in time during the course of stay-at-home orders and this pandemic by the responsibility of your child to be attentive to some of these new understandings about how we can be safe, how we can help to keep other people safe. And I know from the great citizens that your children are that they're going to be thoughtful about that as well, but not without the support, the affirmation, the teaching of the adults in our building who are going to help them to remember, help them to know the ways that we can all be safe. Now, our parents are going to be an important part of that. I mentioned that health attestation that's going to happen each day. We do expect that that's going to be something that's going to be filled out, written to be able to bring with a student to the school bus. That's going to be able to be brought and handed over from a car or from one of our walkers with a parent who's with a walker. But the district is continuing to explore the most effective ways of gathering that attestation information from our families, from our students, so that they can be, entering the building as efficiently as we can. And those are ways that our processes will observe that social distancing all the way through that walk-in process. Our buses, where there is going to be social distancing maintained, fewer than 22 students on buses, no two students in a seat together unless they live in the same household as siblings, those sorts of protocols, and then the additional training and cleaning that happens in our buses. Those cleaning protocols are going to come into our building as well, and that's an important thing that our district has attended to very closely, that our teachers will be a part of, that our custodial staff is going to be a part of, to ensure that those touch points are being washed down, that we're not using our water fountains this year. Please do find the coolest water bottle that you can, and label it, in very clearly for your students so that they're going to be well hydrated, especially during some of these hotter months. but that we're not going to have any mistaken matching water bottles, that we're not going to be using those water fountains. We're going to be having those bathrooms cleaned multiple times throughout the day, each of those spaces around of our hallways, mopping, wiping down some additional disinfectants that are going to be working, that have been tested and that are approved in these circumstances to treat, kill, and eliminate any virus, so that we can know that we are in a clean space, that those folk who are in that space are healthy, because certainly our staff is going to submit to the same health attestations, temperature screenings before we're coming to work each day. We're going to be wearing those masks. We're going to have healthy people coming to school in a clean and safe environment that is spaced out with protocols to help ensure that they are able to maintain those health protocols that are going to be most healthful. A mention regarding volunteers, visitors, community programs. We will be, for the foreseeable future, not welcoming, but having to defer our volunteers, defer our visitors. Our front office staff is going to be smiling, bright-voiced, ready to be able to address parent concerns right there at the front door, through, as many of you all have experienced, that phone system, the buzzer and phone system that's right at our front door, and coming to you, so that we are able to limit that access where, when we think about returning to school in a safe way, we want to make sure that we're as protected as possible for the teachers of your children, for your children, to have that protected learning time, because obviously what we want is to make sure everyone's safe there, and that we don't have to be in a situation where we are necessarily changing gears in the middle of the year. And so our volunteers, our visitors, our lunches are likely to be in our classrooms, again, to be able to continue to reduce those transitions, the frequency with which students are going to be exposed to other folk, and so sad as it makes me, we likely won't be able to have parents coming on for lunch. The amazing, prepared meals that some of you all have taken the time to make during the course of the mornings, delivering to school, those will be ones where we'll have to just be the interface for that, and where that's going to be, discouraged, really, so that we can be observant of keeping our staff's attention on the work that's happening inside of our school building. I want to take a moment and answer just a couple of the questions along the way here. And I do see, thanks to Ms. Watson, our PTA president, for making mention of information about our first day school supply kits. Our before school and after school care programs, we're going to be continuing to be able to provide for before school and after school care. However, that is going to be in relationship with our YMCA rather than a school-based program. Our district has been working very closely in concert with our YMCA to ensure that we're able to provide that necessary support for families in need of that extended day childcare before and after, that they're going to be following our same district protocols, and that they're going to be maintaining these same guidelines that we are going to be able to have along the way. So we will have before and after care. It will follow these same guidelines. It will be in partnership with our YMCA and in coordination with our school district. As I look across our questions, I want to touch just one or two others here that do relate just to this health area before we start to move on and talk a little bit more, a moment about transportation and then the instructional components. So every employee, a question was asked, and thanks to Ms. Sundart, regarding our bus transportation and the health of our drivers. Every employee in Wake County Schools, prior to reporting to any work site, is going to observe the same health screening and protocols that we're going to expect at our building, and that are going to be, our families are going to be accountable for. So all of our bus drivers, come each morning at an incredibly early hour in the 5s, in the 4s o'clocks in the morning, that I hope to not see anytime soon in the 4s. It always hurt me looking at my alarm clock at that hour. And they come to one of our bus transportation hubs. Those screenings we expect to happen right there on site. The same temperature checks would occur, the same attestation to health prior to folk coming on, getting on that bus, coming to your students. That's going to be the same for every maintenance worker that comes into our school, all of our school-based staff, as I mentioned, any district official or visitor to our building is going to go through that same process. We expect that we're going to have the reasonable expectation that folk inside of our building are well. Now, what you all know is that you send your child to school one day healthy, maybe having not slept quite as well as expected the night before, and during the course of the day, they may start feeling badly. You've done everything possible with integrity when you fill out that attestation in the morning, when you send your child to school expecting them to be healthy, and our staff is going to be ready to respond to your student in that circumstance. We're going to make sure that we are, acknowledging and respecting that child while also having that student, removed and away from the rest of their peers, where we can take that individual care from them, can really, supervise and attend to their symptoms, to that temperature check, correspond with families to make sure that we are addressing that student and their health while looking after the health of everyone else. And so that's something that we're going to do. There is absolutely a point that I see from Mr. Mahapatra there, that when we consider what we have learned about this virus and our schools, is that there is not any 100% guarantee of the health of every individual who comes into our school because of some of those factors around testing and asymptomatic cases and the ways that we keep learning from that. But we do believe that we're going to be able to, with all the knowledge that we have gained as a state from our national organizations of health, be carrying this forward in the safest way that we're possibly able to, and that any time that there would be a situation in any of our Wake County schools where we became aware of positive cases or anything like that, that we're going to be able to do that contact tracing, that we're going to be communicating any positive case in a Wake County public school is going to close that school for 24 hours, is going to ensure additional cleaning protocols during that time so that we know that we have, removed the risk that we are coming back into a clean building, and that we are communicating in a way that helps folk know how to make follow-up while still with regard to everyone's rights to confidentiality and those, HIPAA standards that we're bound by, and that certainly all of you all would want the same consideration for your own child. The question came just again on the health situation from Ms. Wallace. Thanks so much, to ask about teachers and their masks. Our teachers are practicing to make sure that they can be understood. No, our teachers would not be in situations except based on a specific health exception, where they're not wearing their masks, in school. And that's going to be for myself, for our school counselors, for our teachers, for our cafeteria workers, for our bus drivers. And I am confident that if I can understand your 5-year-old in all the things that they are trying to tell me about their weekend, that our 5-year-olds even are going to understand our teachers, and the great patience that our teachers show, that so many of you all have had to show with your children through the course of remote learning and homeschooling while home working. That we're going to have that great grace, and that none of us minds repeating themselves again. And the great thing, I do think, in our blended learning scenario where we have in-person learning happening, is that within those smaller groups of students who we will have, we're going to be able to mitigate some of those distractions. We're going to be able to make sure that when a student might not understand something, we're better able to respond to that student because we are working in that smaller group. And so I'm gonna take a minute to start to depart from the health area, and as questions are arising just about the instructional setup, I'm going to mention just about transportation before I talk about our blended learning model and our virtual academy. So some of you all who are bus riders may have already received some communication from transportation, or will be receiving some communication from our bus transportation department, asking you just to acknowledge whether you plan to ride the bus this year. That's going to be an important part of our transportation department's planning for those social distancing protocols on all of our bus routes and the ways that our students will come back. So if you do receive some of that communication, please do make sure that you respond to that in a timely manner so that that planning can go forward. Bus transportation will be available to all students who are eligible for it, as it has been in the past under this blended learning model. And we do expect that we're going to be able to continue to run buses to all of the areas of our base attendance zone for students to be able to ride. And bus transportation will have a heavy hand in the arrangement of group 1, 2, and 3 of our students who are going to be in that rotation coming into our building so that it is possible for that to work. As they look at the efficiency of those routes, some of those things may be double back routes where, some of our bus stops have 40 students patiently waiting there at the bus stop. And that may mean that that one bus is transporting half of those students who have an earlier bus stop time, here to the school. That cleaning protocols are being conducted between routes prior to that bus returning within our 30-minute arrival window to pick up the remaining students, or that students at those stops will be divided up across those groups. We're awaiting guidance from our transportation about the ways that students will be grouped there, but that's going to be an important part of that. So just for our bus transportation, that's a mention there. We will continue to have our cab service that will run supporting the special transportation needs of some of our students. And our district is going to be in communication with those folk who do utilize a contracted cab transportation to the school to make sure that they are making arrangements and based on the family's need or their ability to transport to school. So that'll be hopefully ensuring that there continues to be uninterrupted access to that in-person learning for all of our families who are eligible for transportation. So I'm going to pivot now and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this Plan B and the 2 return to school options that our families are being presented with. The first and primary and somewhat more familiar is this blended learning model, where the primary in-person learning will happen 1 week out of any 3-week stint of time. All of our students, regardless of initial track assignment to tracks 1, 2, 3, or 4, while we're operating underneath this Plan B model for moderate social distancing, where the state has asked a strict observance to less than 50% capacity in any of our school buildings. Our school and all multi-track year-round schools will follow the track 4 calendar. That is the same calendar that we would follow if the governor of the state of North Carolina or the school district, based on changes in health circumstances around our state and our district, was to move to a Plan C fully online learning model, fully remote learning model, where our school buildings would close. It is the same calendar, that track 4 calendar, that our virtual academy is going to operate on, so that there will be consistent collaboration amongst our teachers leading in those different modes of learning, so that there will be consistency in the pacing that students are experiencing across those modes of learning, so that we can really create coherence in the learning experience that every child has. If you've been at Alston Ridge for a while, I hope that you have experienced what we are very intentional about, which is the equitable experience that every child, that every family has, where each child receives what they need based on their unique and individual circumstances, and that their assignment across our tracks provides an equally rigorous, challenging, and robust experience with a full access to the full range of services that students may need. And so following this track 4 calendar will allow for some additional coherence and opportunities to be able to, follow along with that together. So these 2 chances, the blended learning model and the virtual academy. Within the blended learning model, and that's what I'm going to talk about first, and then I'll speak a little bit more to the virtual academy. One of the primary logistical considerations here is that all students are going to be assigned to one of 3 groups of students. On the presently recommended calendar, what will happen is that after the 2 first weeks of school, the first day of school for our calendar being August 17th, that for those first 2 weeks, we'll have something of a staggered entry process. where students in group 1 will attend for 1 day of school in each of the first 2 weeks in order to ground themselves here in our school building, begin to develop that relationship with their new teacher, with that classroom community that they're going to be a part of, with that group, to provide some material and community orientation there. So one group will attend on Monday of each of those 2 weeks. On Wednesday of each of those 2 weeks, likely group 2 will come in. We'll have that same day of community orientation, norming, and settling. And then on our Friday, that third group would come in. So that by the end of the first week, every student who's coming to school for in-person learning under this blended learning model will have been in school for 1 day. They will have met their teacher who's going to lead their primary instruction. They will have met those other peers who are going to be a part of their group cohort at their grade and in their classroom community. And they will have received some of the information and grounded them about what it's going to look like to be a second grader for the first time, a fourth grader, a fifth grader, whatever the case may be. Following that first week, that second week where our students will attend on that 1 day, that rotation of 1 week out of every 3 weeks will begin, where we're going to have a unified experience for our students of 2 weeks of remote learning and that 1 week of in-person learning. With that experience, it will be both similar during that remote learning time and a little bit different. We do anticipate that extending beyond where we had those optional Google Meets in the past, we are anticipating some guidance from our district that will have more availability of live learning that's going to happen while students are learning remotely, that there will be those chances for students, because we will be grading all components, in person, remote learning, and the virtual academy, that students are going to be taking more formal assessments during that time. There is going to be an expectation for attendance while students are remote learning. There is going to be that connection where students are learning some new content while they're home, taking an assessment. Coming in for in-person learning, we're going to provide some follow-up. At other times where students are receiving that new first teaching while they're in person, and then they're doing some of that spiraling, review and practice of that skill while they're home. The great thing is that it's going to be our teachers who provide an excellent and high quality education for every one of our students, who are going to be leading that process in each of those phases. For the in-person learning here, during the remote learning time, and in the majority of circumstances for the virtual academy portion as well. They're going to be in communication, collaboration, making sure that we're providing some of that so that we can go across. So again, just to recap, 2 weeks where we're going to do that little bit of staggered entry orientation. Every student will come to school for one of those days in each of those first 2 weeks before beginning that rotation. Those 3 groups will be evenly divided, and to the best of our ability, after receiving the groupings from Wake County Transportation based on bus ridership, we are going to be trying to ensure that our students who have previously been aligned, to a track, are going to be together with some students who they have been in class with before, been in community with before, and learning from a teacher who's aligned to that same track. Our feeling and intent in trying to use that as a part of the guide, along with the many other factors that are going to go into ensuring an equitable experience across all of our groups who are coming into the building, is that while we've been separated from our school community, separated from peers, separated from one another during the course of this pandemic, the best chance to be restorative in the way in which we return to community is, with some recognition of our peers, with the ability of our teachers to do that personal handoff from teacher to teacher within that track family, within that community, where we're going to be able to steward your student into that next grade with all of that additional insight and information that your last year's teacher has gained over the course of that time, and that will provide when we do return, to all in-person learning 1 day in the future, whether it's in the spring semester or whether it's for the next school year. we're retaining some of those connections with the expectation that we will, continue to be a multi-track year-round school serving students across all those calendars, and that, we want to maintain those connections that really make our large school, feel so much smaller and feel more intimate and connected for all of our kids. I'm going to take just a moment, and so pardon the blank stare here, where I'm going to look over the questions. Thanks again to Miss Oliver and Miss Freeman for curating some of those so I can take a look here. And then I'm going to be, continuing here and talk about our virtual academy portion of it. Okay, so I want to talk about the virtual academy, and then I'm going to come back to talk a little bit just about who's going to be leading instruction and the way in which we are going to be ensuring that coherence. So our virtual academy is going to be a new structure that acknowledges the importance of some choice and some family autonomy to be able to respect the health circumstances or the worries of individual families about what a return to in-person learning might look like for their family. The virtual academy is an option for every family in Wake County public schools, and it is going to be one where opting into enrolling in that program is going to begin, slated by the district, by their plan, on this coming Friday. There is no first come, first serve, where you would need to make sure that you are refreshing that virtual academy website that's going to go live on Friday. It is already live, but it's just a shell right now. If you have gone to that site, and you would see that it's not rich with information, but just is really a placeholder for the information that is going to come, and information is going to come out from our district to all of our families who do have that contact information registered through PowerSchool. That registration and enrollment into the virtual academy, parents will express their interest in enrolling in the virtual academy program within Alston Ridge Elementary School between this coming Friday and the 20th of school is the currently anticipated window. We're going to be able to see at the school level those folks who are expressing that interest, so that we can begin to plan the process of responsively staffing our virtual academy with our teachers. Or if there was a circumstance where the demand for our virtual academy either was so great that we weren't able to staff it with our Alston Ridge Elementary School teachers, or that within the thresholds that the demand was lower than we were able to justify being able to allocate, then we're going to work in concert with teachers within our area of the school district to ensure that we are presenting a great and well-qualified teacher for all of our students. But our expectation, the intent of the district, is that a highly qualified teacher from each student's school is going to be leading that virtual academy. And we've got some great folk ready to be able to lead that work for sure. So the interest, the registration for that process will begin. It's going to be a Google form that's going to be posted to that virtual academy starting Friday and over a term of the upcoming 10 days. Families are going to be asked to make a commitment to a minimum of a semester of attendance within that virtual academy, or to a year of it. That is intended especially for our secondary schools to acknowledge the way in which scheduling and courses happen there. And it is going to come with some logistical challenges. The expectation would be that a family who's opting into the virtual academy is going to continue in that virtual academy for at minimum that semester, and that they would not, finding out that it's maybe a little bit less of a match for, the needs of their child, be able to just opt out, switch, and begin attending in person through the blended learning model. The expectation from the district is that families will enroll, opt in, and participate in that program really, sort of independently for at least that semester or for the year. At that semester point, we'll have some logistical considerations, as families may choose to opt into the virtual academy at that semester point, or where families would be seeking to return from the virtual academy into the blended learning in-person rotation and structure. And at that time, the district is going to provide some guidance about the ways that students will make that transition it's a critical part of why having a consistent schedule across those are going to be really important. So as you consider whether the virtual academy is the option that you would choose for your family, do consider that it is an expectation for it to be at minimum a semester and preferably a year commitment to that program, that not all course offerings will necessarily be available through the virtual academy program. And that is especially true for our middle schools and our high schools, for our magnet schools, where elective programming and things may not be able to be delivered through that. But it is also relevant for us, where we do expect that there would be a different experience of our specials programming from the in-person portion of it, from the virtual academy. And so, for that length of time, that opt-in, it is also possible that it would not be an Alston Ridge teacher leading your student-specific cohort, but that we would be closely coordinating with a highly qualified teacher from one of our other regional schools who is, experienced and expert in that content area, and working still with our teachers, with our team, in collaboration to ensure that consistency of pacing and similar experience that's there. Those are a couple of the guarantees that are going to come with the blended learning model, which is going to be an exposure to the full range of that curriculum and experience that students have been familiar with, that it is certainly and definitely going to be an Alston Ridge, teacher who's going to be leading that instruction, along with just exclusively Alston Ridge students during the course of that time. But that virtual academy is going to include some live learning, just like the remote learning weeks of that 3-week rotation for the blended learning model, where students are learning online. It is going to be with the same curriculum materials. For example, for those of you all who have had a student in grades 2, 3, 4, or 5, or in our middle grades, you know that EL education has been the really rich literacy curriculum that we've adopted, and will be the way in which our students are learning their reading content. That our same district math curriculum and resources are those that are going to be used for our math. Consistent pacing, consistent resources, and not separate standalone things that would only be available to students curriculum-wise in person or through the virtual academy. I've talked through most of those pieces there, I think, with the virtual academy and blended learning, with the exception of I do want to speak to AIG services, ESL services, special education services, and intervention services for our students who need or benefit from that programming based on some identification. And both through the virtual academy as well as through the blended learning model, both the online portion of remote learning and the face-to-face, the in-person, will include those services to which students need. I'm going to take a minute, take a look over here at our questions, try to address some of those before I talk just a little bit about, I'm going to talk about childcare just for a moment, which is an important concern for all of our families and for us at the school. Mr. George, and glad you're here. The online classes seem to be much less than in person at school. So to confirm, in our virtual academy, online classes is the singular way in which our students will experience learning through online learning. The blended learning model will include 1 week of in-person learning and 2 weeks of remote learning for all of our students, where that's the online learning portion of it that's going to be facilitated, by our teachers here from Alston Ridge Elementary School. So there is no in-person learning for the virtual academy. There is 1 out of every 3 weeks of in-person learning for the blended learning model. And Mr. George, if I didn't, answer your question directly, please do offer some clarification in the chat so that I can come back to that. We had a question just about our schedule for our in-person learning. For our virtual academy, Mr. George asked just about recess. And for our virtual academy, your children are going to be at home, and I encourage you to have them run around outside as often as possible, jump up and down on the mattress, cartwheels and jumping jacks. Go Noodle is an amazing, if you haven't already had your child subject you to doing a Go Noodle with them, where you're doing some silly dance moves to some kids pop music or something like that. Please do spend as much time in recess as you're able through that virtual academy fully online, where you're bearing the important burden of providing some of that teaching and support at home. In school, we do expect to be able to continue to offer what will likely be more structured play opportunities so that we can continue to observe the health of our students. And we're going to be receiving some more guidance on the ways that we're going to be able to schedule that. We are fortunate because we do have large play spaces at our school. And while any use of playground equipment, where all of our playground spaces are closed certainly right now, that would require those disinfecting protocols and cleaning, we got a big old field out there that is going to be awesome for our students to do yoga, tai chi, play kickball, to be able to play socially distanced touchless tag as they go along. The kinds of things that your students' teachers during that in-person learning are going to lead, are going to supervise, and ensure is going to be safe. We do expect that we're still going to have that physical activity for our kids, and that will be outside as much as we're able to be. A question from Pratibha. Now, Pratibha, about the question of will the remote learning be led by the same teacher throughout the year for one class? So I want to talk about that in two ways. One, for our blended learning, the face-to-face and remote learning portions of that 3-week rotation, as well as for our virtual academy. For our blended learning model, what we want to be able to do is create a really coherent experience for our students, but that likely is going to be one that is going to be an experience that's shared, where responsibility for that remote learning portion is going to be coordinated in team teaching structures within our grade level teachers here at the school. That is the only way that we can ensure that we're providing regular feedback, live learning opportunities to students who are home while we have students in front of our teachers. And as we plan for that team teaching, we're grateful to have almost all of our really terrific faculty returning, already coordinating and brainstorming and working with our administration on what these models might look like for coordination of that. So it may be that you have another teacher at the grade level, like in our previous remote learning experience, who your student is seeing a asynchronous recorded video of a context, of a concept coming on, and they're seeing that video coming from another teacher, that they are receiving comments and feedback from a team teacher who is connected to them in school, but may not be that person who is face to face with them in the classroom for the majority of their time. Their teacher for that in-person learning. But that's going to be fully coordinated with this team teaching structure that we're working on developing to make sure that we're able to respond really effectively and provide the affirmation, feedback, the grading, the response to our students who are at home. The syllabus for remote learning, thanks Vinay for your question, is going to be consistent between the remote learning time and the in-person learning. And so I'm going to say that again just in two different ways. Our virtual academy will maintain consistent pacing with the blended learning model that's going to include both online learning and the in-person learning that's going to happen there. And for our 3 groups, those divided 3 groups of students who are coming in on that rotation for blended learning, that syllabus is going to be consistent for all of them, just with the exception that, right there at that staggered start, we're probably going to be having, a little more maybe live learning that's happening through online learning for the very first week of group 3 that does sort of have the 2 weeks of staggered entry, followed by 2 weeks of online learning before they have their week of full instruction. We're going to be responsive to that, making sure that we're getting students what they need if they have to, wait their turn just right there at that staggered start to have their in-person learning time for their full week with their folk. So curriculum materials will be consistent across our settings. The pacing is going to be consistent across our settings. And those teachers who are working in the virtual academy, our teachers who are working with the blended learning model in school are going to be regularly collaborating to make sure that we've got some coherence and consistency across that experience for our students. And so I'm going to take a look here. The virtual academy taught by the same teachers in the blended learning model. No. So the virtual academy will be a program within our school where some of our teachers are going to be teachers in the virtual academy. And so we would think about that a little bit more like you think about your homeroom teacher in years past. We would expect that teacher who's leading in the virtual academy is the primary teacher for the virtual academy, and that they are not a part of the online teaching and in-person teaching that's happening through the blended learning structure. And pardon me for just taking a look here across our questions as I try to make sure that we are responding to those. We're going to try to come back to the question about SSA and accelerative practices later on. Full-time virtual academy testing. I did mention earlier, and I want to say again, one thing that's going to be really different about the remote learning, the online learning portions, both through the virtual academy and through the blended learning model, is that different than the previous iteration in March, April, and May of this year, where attendance was not taken and where grades were not addressed, is that in each of these settings, we're going to be following district policies around grading, following state guidance on grading, and that we will be performing assessments in each of these contexts where we're trying to assess learning. Now, we are really blessed at the elementary level where we use a standards-based grading system where we're trying to evaluate and communicate with you about how well your student understands a particular concept or how well they're able to carry out a particular skill at this time. Different than in our secondary schools where grades are assigned oftentimes, based on, completion, accuracy, with more formal tests, that are taken. And so our teachers are going to be working to use the technical tools that are available through Google Forms, some really neat things that your students are already doing actually in school, where we're using some Google Forms and things to collect immediate real-time feedback and assessment data on students. We're going to use some of those same tools at home. But certainly we are going to be communicating with families as we move into the year about what those grading practices are going to look like, the ways that we're collecting it, and the ways that that's translating into the progress reports and report cards that you're going to be seeing as it goes along. Within that virtual academy, the day, we don't yet have from our school district the anticipated sort of schedule, for that day, but it would be expected to cover those same core instructional components that are happening for that live learning. And I'm going to look forward to communicate with those families who are opting into the virtual academy, certainly about that schedule and the way that those different component parts of the day are going to happen. I apologize that is not something that our district has fully expanded to be able to define as far as a recommended daily schedule and amounts of time allocated to each different content area for the virtual academy. But we would expect it's going to be relatively consistent to be able to accomplish the same curriculum that we have for the blended learning. That blended learning time where the in-person learning is happening is going to be a more consistent experience to what students have had in the past in school as far as the structure of that school day for instruction, while the remote learning time is going to be more similar. The online learning time in rotation for our students, the 2 weeks that they are alternating, 1 week in person, 2 weeks of online instruction. Those 2 weeks of online instruction are going to be more similar to that virtual academy, that structure along the way. So I'll look forward to communicating more about what that schedule looks like based on our district's guidance for our instructional practices to be able to really effectively deliver the curriculum that we do have. All right. Virtual Academy first day. It's going to be August 17th. We do anticipate that's going to happen. Just a return, and certainly understand Snehal adding late. Thanks for being with us. The switching between the Virtual Academy and the blended model is going to happen just at the semester break or at the end of the year. Based on the guidance that we have right now from our district, that families who are opting into the Virtual Academy will be expected to do so now, and that they will be attending for at minimum a semester in the Virtual Academy, and that folks who are coming for the blended learning, coming into the school building, are going to be carrying through, underneath that structure over the course of, again, that semester, to the year. as it goes along. No, Mr. Settles, and thanks for that. Will students in the virtual academy or for the online learning portion of the rotation of the blended learning be expected to be logged onto a computer for 8 hours a day? And the answer is no. What this will not be, although it will include some additional live learning components, this is not going to be 8 hours of sitting in front of a screen. It is going to be that combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities, right? Real time, and here's some content, here's an activity, please go do. Feedback is going to come around in the back end to affirm and recommend based on what was performed, and so that's going to happen. And so I'll come back around just a couple of these questions here about the division of blended learning, where we've answered that earlier. And I encourage you, if you get the chance to be able to go back, we will have this recording available for you as it goes along. For Ms. Watson, just about our specials program, we do expect that all of our students who are participating in person are going to have specials, that our specialists are going to be continuing to deliver those opportunities for enrichment with in-person learning in our school day, as well as carrying forward with some of those opportunities for students to continue their exposure with the online learning portions of their week's rotation. And so we are looking forward to being able to continue that. And so I want to maybe just come back to what a question that's come up a couple times, which is just, who's going to be leading my child? And the answer I can tell you for certain within the blended learning program, one of our terrific Alston Ridge teachers is going to be for each of the component parts of that is going to be leading the learning. And for the vast majority of our virtual academy students, that is going to be also an Alston Ridge faculty member who's going to be assigned and working with students within that virtual academy program. But it is likely that if we do, have a chance to be able to return for fully in-person learning where students are attending every day, that's going to mean that we are, returning again to our tracks and dividing up again. And inevitably that may require some, teacher changes that are going to happen so that we can line students back up within those cohorts that are going to happen there. We know that because if we were to have students coming back in from a virtual academy at mid-semester who are departing, there's going to likely be a teacher change that's going to happen there. And so it is a really important part of us being on a same calendar, our teachers working really closely together to be coordinated, to be aware of our students' different needs and ready to pick them up at those handoff points that might occur based on guidance from the governor, based on the way in which health circumstances across our county, across our state, across our country are evolving. And so it is possible that students could experience more than one person this year as the person that they feel like is their teacher, right? They're sort of one person. And the ways that we're going to be trying to prepare for the possibility of those eventualities and maximize your students' feedback and the ways that our teachers are working to respond to your students' learning needs is by doing some of that, co-teaching within our blended learning model. That's going to mean that just as your students already did, if they've already been here with us, that they were, seeing pre-recorded video content from teachers across that grade level, teachers that they know, teachers that they're familiar, who have been outside at recess, who have been there in lunch, who are passing in the hallway with specials, who have stepped in to ask a question, borrow some glue from their teacher, but that we're gonna continue some of that team teaching work to ensure that your kid's getting prompt feedback, that we are really being attentive to students both while they're online learning as well as doing the in-person learning portions of that experience. So this, I want to talk just for a moment about childcare. If you, like me, have children who are going to experience maybe different parts of the schedule, you may have non-school age children and school age children. You're going to be thinking about, if you're opting into the blended learning model, how you are going to balance the time that students are in-person learning and those 2 weeks where they are, learning online. And thanks in advance to each of you all who have, during the course of this time already, been looking out for your neighbors, those of you all who have checked in with each other, showing that care for one another, because our school is one of those points of connection for each of you all. But all of the time that we've experienced as people over the course of this last, going to be coming on, 4 or 5, 6 months here has been challenging. Please do continue to look out for each other, and thank you for the ways that you are, being a caregiver, being someone who is just caring to think about those circumstances for each other. But our district is working closely with those private and independent childcare providers in the community, as well as with the YMCA as a community partner, to ensure that we're coordinating broader access to full-day childcare during the online learning times of that blended learning rotation. That is almost like having, within every 3 weeks, 2 weeks of track out camp. That, for those YMCA programs, for so many of those other independent programs, that they're going to set aside time for students to be doing some of the online learning that they're going to be accountable for as well. And there's going to be more information coming out from our district as they continue to extend the conversations and the work in those partnerships to support families while their students are doing the online learning weeks of that blended learning time. It's going to be hard. And I'm grateful for those community agencies, for those providers in the community, and to each of you all who's going to be looking out for each other to make that possible for you as working families, as parents, or whatever your circumstances may be as we navigate that together. If you joined late, there was an earlier question just about our before and after care program, and we are looking forward to having the YMCA as a partner in those programs to continue to provide before and after school extended day childcare here on site. And registration information and more information is going to be coming out about that in the coming weeks to ensure access and coordination there. That covers the majority of the portions of this overview agenda that we've tried to provide. And if you've been with us, here since the beginning, then it is 7 o'clock, and a child somewhere is screaming, go to sleep because they're tired, or for dinner, or you all have figured out parenting way better than I have, and I am looking forward to getting some tips from you all. So I want to just, as folk may have to start to step away around this hour point, to say and reiterate how grateful I am for you coming today to be a part of this conversation as we look to bring evolving information to you. I'm going to look forward to doing this again in the hopes that we can provide a feedback loop for some of your questions. I hope that the questions that you haven't gotten answered, or that may be unique and personal to your individual family circumstance, that you'll email them along. You can send them directly to me so that we can try to get you the information that you need as you prepare for your students' return to learning, so that you feel confident that we are going to be responsive and attuned to the safety concerns that we all have about our children, so that your students are coming in to the safest and healthiest environment that we're able to provide every day, in adherence to all those guidelines and recommendations that we have in place for health, as well as preparing to provide a great learning experience that's going to ensure that we pick up and spiral back in some of that learning that may have been missed over the last quarter, that we build a great program for your student to learn the new curriculum of their new grade, and that we're carrying forward across the virtual academy, across the blended learning environments, a consistent and really rigorous experience that attends to the needs of your child, to every child, in an equitable way. So if you have to step away while I go through and just try to answer some of these remaining questions, thank you for your time. Thank you for your trust and for your support as we venture forward. I look forward to continuing to share that evolving guidance, and please do look for guidance from our district as well. If you're leaving, we love you and we miss you, and we are really looking forward to seeing you soon. So just out of respect for some additional questions and wanting this to be a forum where we can get as many of those answered as we can, I am just going to go right through these ones that have been copied over here from our assistant principals and from our comments and in advance, so that I can try to make sure we answer those. from Mr. Settles some concerns about exposure for our students during those cycles of online learning, which is absolutely true. Anytime that our students are home for our track outs and any other times. And that is why it is going to be really important, those, parent attention and care for their children's health, thinking carefully about whether their child's health is going to be ensure that they're safe and ready to come into school so that we can all as a community be mutually accountable for the health of our community. But it is why those health checks are going to be crucially important, why the work in partnership with our county health departments to really consider the way that we trace back where those contacts are so that we can be responsive to that and limit spread that does touch our local community. We want to make sure that we are following those so that we can be as safe as we possibly can. Carthy had asked just about children wearing face masks. I hope that you all have found some cute or cool and definitely comfortable face coverings for your children during the course of this time. They are strongly recommended for all students in the elementary grades. However, they are not required. And so there are going to be times where students, either because of some specific health exceptions, because of their comfort, because of a family decision, that a student's not going to be wearing a face mask throughout the course of the day. And that's why those other two W's in our three W's are going to be so critical, right? Waiting 6 feet apart, and that spacing that we're going to remind, guide and observe in any of our hallways during our admission, during our dismissal process, rethinking those so that we can maintain that social distancing. And then our frequent hand washing, that's going to be so important, as well as every adult, who is in contact with your child, here at school and on our transportation, wearing those masks. Hopefully those are going to be steps that are going to make it possible for us to be that much safer as it goes along. I had spoken to this a little question, but just want to make sure that I answer back the question of the same teacher for a particular subject all the time during virtual sessions. It is possible that if we had at a particular grade, two of our teachers who are teaching in the virtual academy, that there's going to be some team teaching or coordination, but that is going to be in the online learning portions. There's going to be an expectation of consistency, for each of your children. That may mean some team teaching with another, one or two teachers who are working directly with your child. And one of the truest things I believe, because I know and trust in really the greatness of our teachers here on our faculty, is that that's going to be well coordinated and only increase your students' experience, because we're going to be able to use really the individual expertise of our kids to serve your family and your individual student. With the question of single subject acceleration. And so I just want to acknowledge that this is not something that we have guidance from our district on as of yet. If your student has previously participated in single subject acceleration in years past, the expectation is that accelerative experience has continued forward. And while I do expect for us, at a school level, for the district to be able to see through the logistics, to be able to provide that as an accelerative practice, we don't have that clarity and guidance. And for students who have not previously participated in single subject acceleration, you all know that the assessment opportunity for placement in single subject acceleration did not take place here in our spring. And so we are awaiting guidance both on if single subject acceleration will be an available accelerative practice in the virtual academy, whether it will be an accelerative practice available for the blended learning model of in-person and online learning rotation, and whether we'll have any new students accessing that. So we are awaiting guidance on that, and I look forward to communicating out across our school community when we do know that information. But for those identified students in those service areas of English as a second language, special education, our AIG program already based on their previous identification, and also those students who we've been working with them and with their families on some strategic academic and behavioral interventions, we're going to continue to be able to really attend to those models. Ms. Huber had asked, and thanks Ms. Huber for asking about our lunchtime. We do expect right now that our students are going to be having lunch as a part of their smaller group and in their classroom. There may be an opportunity in the future for students in observing that maximum social distancing and fully spaced out with cleaning rotations where students might at a future time be able to meet within our cafeteria. And we really are blessed at Alston Ridge because of the size of that space, where it would be reasonable, for our kids to be able to be coming into a fully sanitized, safe, spaced environment there with supervision in place. All of our child nutrition service for our students who are buying a lunch, those are all going to be, prepared in advance, pre-packaged for grab and go, so that we are not handling those foods, so that we are not making individual a la carte choices that would increase the risk of creating some level of contamination. So for our students buying lunch, there is going to be a difference in the way in which those meals are prepared. I do expect that we'll continue to provide menus published in advance so that families will be able to be aware of those things. And crucially, any family who may be at a level of financial need where they'd like to apply for free or reduced lunch service to be able to access that lunch program, those applications, are available and are open to be able to have folk, apply for that support through our child nutrition program. I did make the reminder earlier in the guide, right? Our water fountains, aren't going to be used, and so, we'll want our students, bringing water bottle clearly labeled, exclusively for their use, obviously, as it goes along. I want to refer back to one of the things that is going to be emerging here, which is our students' assignment to the groups for our families opting into that blended learning model, for the groups that will follow that in-person rotation into the online learning portion. And the hope, and we saw this in some of the questions in advance, for for families to be able to consider childcare, the way that they're going to be balancing having students assigned to the same groups. And I would want to share that there will be, two factors that are going to be considered by the district in assignment to these groups. And one of them will not be an individual circumstance and childcare arrangement at this time within a neighborhood, within some families, some non-related families. The two factors are going to be bus ridership and families, where across the levels, students will be assigned to the same group: high school, middle school, and elementary school, and within our school, siblings will be assigned to that same group. But those will, at this time, be the only certain factors that will be considered by the district in assigning students to those groups. That is one of the reasons why it is going to be so important for some additional childcare resources to be available to our families, as I know that's going to be a heavy lift, and is not a challenge that's lost on me for many of you all in trying to make plans for that. The timing of the scheduling of those groups, we're going to have students assigned through our virtual academy, hopefully. They're wrapped up by the 20th, which is going to allow us to determine some of that staffing for that program, and then going to be able to have received from the transportation department the initial allocation to those groups, where at the school level, we're then going to be following up to try to maintain the consistency of some of those track relationships with teachers and with those students as a general priority for us as a school, so that we really are going to be approaching August before we see those groups rolled out to families. I do expect that, and that will be recognizably painfully short notice in order to be able to put things in place for families. But that is the timeline that we have received some communication from our district. For our kindergartners following that rolling in schedule, we are so excited for Miss Yorst, for your new student coming into our community, and for all of our kindergartners who are going to join us for the first time. We do typically have a staggered entry process of some initial assessment prior to assignment to those classroom cohorts, and we do expect that that's most likely going to be accommodated within those 2 initial orientation weeks. But I'll be frank and say that we don't have the additional information on how staggered entry will work for rising kindergartners and for their assignment, to the groups. And I'm going to look forward to being in touch back specifically with our rising kindergarten families about that as we get more guidance to it. And I'll make sure that I advocate for some more answers as it goes about that, so that we can share those back for them. Students expected to be present. How many students do we expect to be present? We do expect that across, generally a cohort that's going to be some, 21 students, that we're going to see a third of those students coming in. So anywhere, probably depending on enrollment in our virtual academy and those class capacity issues for our social distancing, that we'll have anywhere between maybe 5 and 15 students in one group of in-person learning at any given time, and that the size of that grouping is going to be guided really by what's going to be safe and the ways that we're using that co-teaching model to be responsive and attuned to the instructional needs of all of our kids. So those will vary a little bit in size based on some of those factors. For our virtual learning academy, for Snehal, a laptop, a Chromebook be provided. My hope is that for you as families who have experienced already the remote learning, the online learning portions, that we've been able to support you in gaining access to a device and internet connectivity that's going to support your learners' needs at home. In the virtual academy application, that is going to be something where families would indicate if they did have a technology need, and our district technology services division is looking at the ways that they're going to be able to provide access points for our students to be able to fully participate, which is going to be especially important because attendance will be taken and because the grading will happen within that virtual academy, similar to the blended learning model. And so, yes, we hope is the answer to that. For Mr. George, and thanks again for continuing to be with us and thoughtful about this. Each of your questions along this helps for me to know the questions I can go back and ask of our district to get into our parents' hands the information they'll need. There would not, the question being, can we switch back and forth between the virtual academy and the blended learning model, is that at the point of choosing the virtual academy, that commitment is expected to be for at minimum a full semester, and wouldn't be able to opt back out if, as a family, you recognize that maybe this is not going as well as we hoped, or certainly based on some childcare, some work changes, some health changes that might transpire over the course of the time. We would expect for families to continue learning based on that choice, virtual academy or blended learning model, throughout the course of the semester. If we do see students, a significant number of students opting into a virtual academy, was the question, would blended learning be paused? No. We do expect, absent any further district or state guidance, that we will continue to provide the opportunity for in-person learning, regardless of the choice for a large proportion of our students to participate in the virtual academy. Selfishly, I would love for all of our families and our students to be in person, because that's going to be the chance for us to provide the most control over that environment and the greatest access to all the different parts of the school experience for our students. But we know that some of our families are going to need, or really are going to see the unique importance of a virtual academy option for their family. And so, that is one where we're gonna make sure that experience is as rich as possible for those who have to make a choice to be able to participate through that virtual academy. Thanks to Mr. George. Answers to the questions be posted. We're gonna this video is gonna be saved here for a portion of time, so some of those answers will be back here, and I'll look forward to the district's communication. Hopefully is going to continue to flesh this out and answer some of those. My communication hopefully will, but I don't expect right now. I'll take a look at and see if there might be a way to create an analog, just a written portion for folk to be able to check back on frequently asked questions and as those evolve. For Mr. Barnett, daycare is offering a private kindergarten option for the upcoming school year. Yes. The question is, would our student lose their place here at Alston Ridge? And that is a real possibility. As a capped school, families' choices to be enrolling in a private, in another charter, a homeschooling option for a family where they're not participating in the virtual academy or in the blended learning model, would mean that student would no longer be fully enrolled at Alston Ridge, and that the ability to re-enroll would be dependent on space available at that time of re-enrollment. And so that is a risk. And I certainly understand for the range of options that are out there, as much as I believe that Alston Ridge is our community's first and best choice for the education of every child, I acknowledge that there are those individual circumstances where families are making choices that are difficult ones during this time. And I respect and honor those, but there are potentially some consequences as it relates to the enrollment. For Mr. Barnett, also just about AIG and SSA. I did talk about this a little bit earlier, but yes, AIG service is going to continue to be provided through the virtual academy portion and through this. We're really excited about some of the ways that Ms. Slavinsky and Ms. Schneider, and looking forward to some additional staff coming on board to support our AIG identified students with some really rich options for enrichment, critical thinking, and continued extension for our students. And we are awaiting the guidance from the district about whether SSA is going to be an option in this coming year. And a question here from Ms. Arana about how we would share with the Alston Ridge community how parents are electing for kids to return. I'm thinking that this question, Ms. Arana, and forgive if this is wrong, please repost your question. You'll be able to make this choice really primarily. The default is every family is going to be returning to the blended learning model, unless beginning this Friday, a family is choosing to opt into the virtual academy. Communication is going to come out from the district about what that process will look like. It's expected to be open for about 10 days from the 10th through the 20th for families to be able to indicate their preference to attend the virtual academy and making a commitment for at minimum a semester's attendance in the virtual academy program. We wouldn't broadcast more broadly, I think, where the balance necessarily, or certainly not individual families' choices, but we'll continue to talk with families about what does learning look like across our Alston Ridge community, where we see both of those parts, the virtual academy online learning and the in-person and online learning portions of the blended learning being together. And so Mr. Settles, just there are going to be, I anticipate, some details of the virtual academy that will not be fully communicated by our district by the 10th, but that I am hopeful, just for the benefit of all of our families, are going to be clarified by that end of the opt-in period, so those can be covered. And back for Kanika, the question about being logged in for the virtual academy, no, we do not have any expectation that live learning logged in for the full extent of a typical 6.5-hour school day would be the expectation for students learning in the virtual academy, that it will continue to be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous opportunities for students to learn that curriculum. I've covered most of our questions from the chat. If I'm missing yours, please forgive me. I want to touch base just over our other area of additional questions to make sure that I've answered those and think that I've covered them. One of those, heavy weight of those questions in advance were around the determination of the groups. And I've mentioned just again that those will be guided by bus transportation, sibling relationships, and then our efforts to maintain some continuity of the student relationships and the adult handoffs that we've made within our individual tracks. And that we know that all of those logistics is unlikely to be communicated from our district and from our school until the very end of July, right there at the beginning of August, as those students will be assigned to them. I think we've covered most of these other areas, and would mention just maybe one or two that I am seeing here. Will the library be open? We have just a wonderful media coordinator who's joining us this coming year, Miss Kara McConnell. She already is looking for ways that we're going to be able to provide some checkout, some chances for our kids to be exposed to our print resources, and are hopeful that we're going to have that that permission from the district to be able to do so. But we're looking forward to being able to do that. Question about enrollment: will our school be capped still for this upcoming school year and the following? Yes, we are significantly over the capping capacity of our school, and we do expect to continue to have that capping enforced, so that when we do return to fully in-person learning, we're going to be able to support all of our students. that on this blended structure, we're going to be able to meet the access expectation for all of our families, and that we'll be working through that. Hopefully, I have covered so many more of these that will take place. So many of these questions that have been listed and indicated in advance that we're gonna come along with them. I hope, again, that if you've been here with us throughout the course of this chat, that we've been able to answer most of your questions, and that if we haven't, if you've got some that are personal to you or that we haven't responded to yet, please do take the time, send along an email to me so that we can get back to you. It may take me a little longer to answer all those questions, but we want to make sure you've got the information that you need to feel confident about this reopening, this re-entry experience for each of your children, and in the great chance that that we are cherishing to start learning again, full time with your kids. I'm going to, wrap up here and just say again, thanks for participating. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for continuing to ask those questions so that we can learn from that, be really thoughtful about the health and well-being of your children, the way that we provide that rich learning experience that's going to allow each of your children to be engaged, be satisfied, and excel, and the ways that we also look to help coordinate the support that you're going to need as an individual family for it here. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye and good night to all of you. It has been wonderful, and I hope you found this valuable. I look forward to seeing you all soon and communicating with you about our continued work as a community. Have a great night.